The meaning of royal tours. When soft power prevents loss. Royal tours are often dismissed as symbolic, yet history shows they can shift narratives at critical moments. In 2012, during Queen Elizabeth II's Diamond Jubilee, royal visits helped stabilize Commonwealth sentiment at a time when Republican movements were gaining traction. Visibility mattered. For Catherine, tours serve a similar function. Following periods of royal controversy, whether family disputes or public criticism, her presence abroad redirects focus towards service and continuity. In several Commonwealth tours, positive reception of Catherine and William helped counter narratives of a detached monarchy. Royal tours also support diplomatic relationships that formal politics cannot easily mend. Cultural visits, youth engagement, and charitable events create goodwill that outlasts political cycles. In this sense, royal tours do not score victories, they prevent defeats. They preserve relevance, calm uncertainty, and reinforce alliances. Catherine's role within them is not ornamental. She is a stabilizing asset deployed when visibility must reassure rather than provoke. Soft power works best when unnoticed. Catherine's effectiveness lies precisely there, in preventing the monarchy from losing ground rather than claiming new territory. Kate as a national representative, visible and invisible roles. Publicly, Princess Catherine's role on royal tours appears ceremonial, attending events, meeting communities, and highlighting charitable causes. Beneath this surface, however, lies a quieter layer of responsibility that functions as soft power infrastructure. Internally, Catherine gathers information. She observes tone, public reception, and local sensitivities, feeding impressions back to advisors and diplomatic teams. Her interactions provide insight into how Britain is perceived beyond formal channels. She also serves as a relational buffer. Her presence humanizes British diplomacy, softening political tension through personal warmth. This is particularly effective in Commonwealth nations, where historical relationships with Britain are complex. Catherine's neutrality allows engagement without reopening political wounds. Another hidden role is reputational repair. During periods when the monarchy faces criticism at home, overseas tours can reassert legitimacy. Catherine's reliability reassures international audiences that the institution remains stable, regardless of domestic turbulence. Finally, she acts as a continuity signal. Governments change, royal figures remain. Catherine's long-term visibility allows Britain to project consistency across decades. Her role is less about influence in the moment and more about maintaining trust over time, a form of power that operates quietly but persistently. Diplomatic conduct rules: what a princess must do on royal tours. Royal diplomacy operates on precision rather than improvisation, and Princess Catherine's conduct during overseas visits follows a strict set of formal and informal rules. At the most basic level, neutrality is non-negotiable. She must never express political opinions, endorse policies, or comment on local controversies. Even facial expressions are considered part of diplomatic language. Visible surprise, disagreement, or excessive familiarity can be misread as judgment. Protocol governs everything from greetings to seating. Catherine is briefed in advance on cultural customs, how to greet heads of state, when physical contact is appropriate, and which gestures carry symbolic meaning. For example, modest dress in conservative countries or color choices that echo national symbols are deliberate acts of respect rather than fashion statements. Timing is another rule rarely discussed. She is expected to arrive, speak, and exit according to tightly managed schedules that align with diplomatic messaging. Private conversations are treated as confidential by default. Repeating or paraphrasing informal remarks is forbidden. Perhaps the most demanding rule is emotional discipline. Catherine must project warmth without intimacy and empathy without over-identification. She listens more than she speaks. This restraint ensures that attention remains on the relationship between nations, not on her personal reactions. These rules are not about limiting her role, they are about protecting its function. In royal diplomacy, the absence of error is itself success. Catherine's adherence to these protocols allows Britain to communicate respect, continuity, and reliability without ever issuing a formal statement. A deliberately constructed image, historical models, and Kate's choice. Throughout history, royal women have embodied distinct diplomatic archetypes. Queen Alexandra was the glamorous connector, Princess Margaret the cultural provocateur, and Princess Diana the emotionally accessible humanitarian. Each image carried influence and risk. Catherine's image draws selectively from this lineage while avoiding its most destabilizing elements. Rather than charisma or emotional intensity, Catherine has cultivated an image of composure and reliability. This aligns most closely with Queen Elizabeth II's model, restrained authority rather than personal magnetism. Her public warmth is carefully moderated, ensuring approachability without overexposure. Historically, princesses who leaned too heavily into visibility often overshadowed the institution they served. Catherine's image resists that temptation. She does not dominate headlines during tours, she complements them. Her clothing choices, for instance, frequently incorporate local references while remaining unmistakably British, subtle signaling rather than spectacle. This image is not accidental. It is constructed to withstand repetition. A royal tour is not about a single moment, but cumulative impressions over years. Catherine's consistency ensures that each appearance reinforces the last. By choosing stability over emotional drama, Catherine positions herself as a diplomatic constant. In doing so, she avoids becoming a personality-driven figure and instead becomes a dependable symbol, an image designed not to excite briefly, but to endure. How Kate creates goodwill. Princess Catherine's ability to create goodwill during royal tours lies not in grand gestures, but in calibrated attentiveness. She studies context, listens before acting, and adapts her presence to local sensitivities, an approach that turns symbolism into diplomacy. One frequently cited example is the 2011 Canada tour, her first major overseas visit after marriage. Rather than positioning herself as a distant royal figure, Kate engaged in understated interactions, speaking directly with local communities, showing visible curiosity, and allowing William to share space rather than dominate it. Canadian media noted her approachability without informality, a balance difficult to achieve. Another striking case was the 2018 tour of Sweden and Norway. Kate's wardrobe subtly referenced local design aesthetics while maintaining British formality, signaling respect without mimicry. More importantly, her behavior, measured warmth, attentive listening, and visible ease, helped neutralize skepticism toward the monarchy in increasingly Republican-leaning societies. This was not accidental charm, it was strategic empathy. What makes her approach effective is restraint. Kate avoids emotional overperformance, which can feel theatrical or insincere. Instead, she deploys what might be called quiet attentiveness, eye contact, body language, and patience. In diplomatic terms, this builds trust. Drama enters not through conflict, but through contrast. In a world where public figures often seek attention, Kate's refusal to center herself becomes memorable. Hosts feel acknowledged rather than managed. Her skill lies in making people feel seen without appearing to try. That subtlety is her soft power. Comparison with other royal consorts. Comparing Princess Catherine with other royal consorts highlights how distinct her model is. Princess Diana relied on emotional immediacy, touch, vulnerability, visible empathy, which resonated deeply but sometimes destabilized institutional boundaries. Meghan Markle favored expressive advocacy and direct messaging, aligning with contemporary celebrity diplomacy but clashing with royal expectations of neutrality. Kate occupies a third model, institutional fluency. She rarely introduces herself as a disruptor or reformer. Instead, she operates within existing frameworks, refining them quietly. Unlike Diana, she avoids emotional transparency. Unlike Meghan, she avoids explicit activism. This makes her less polarizing, but also less individually defined. In contrast with European counterparts, such as Queen Maxima of the Netherlands, known for expressive warmth, Kate's composure is cooler. Yet this reserve aligns with British diplomatic tradition, where understatement is read as seriousness. Her strength lies not in standing out, but in stabilizing. This comparison reveals why the monarchy favors her approach in a fragile era. Where others generate attention, Kate generates reassurance. Her model may lack dramatic flair, but it minimizes risk. In a system that values continuity, that difference is decisive. International media response, benefits and risks. International media often frame Kate as the safe face of the modern monarchy. Coverage emphasizes elegance, consistency, and reliability, qualities that reassure allies and soften skepticism. This benefits the royal family by projecting unity and restraint during times of internal strain. However, this approach has limitations. Critics argue that her careful neutrality can appear emotionally distant or overly managed, particularly in cultures that value expressive leadership. The lack of explicit messaging may reduce immediate impact in global media cycles driven by strong narratives. Still, the long-term benefit outweighs the short-term cost. Kate's choices reduce the risk of diplomatic missteps and preserve flexibility. Her image absorbs pressure without amplifying controversy, a crucial asset for a monarchy navigating relevance. In essence, her soft power is slow but durable. And in modern royal diplomacy, durability may be the most valuable currency of all. Moments that drew exceptional attention. Several royal tours involving Princess Catherine became focal points of international attention, not because of controversy, but because of how precisely her presence aligned with diplomatic intent. One widely cited example is the 2012 Diamond Jubilee tour to Southeast Asia, particularly the stop in Malaysia. Catherine wore a locally inspired dress by Jenny Packham that referenced traditional Malaysian motifs without turning them into costume. The gesture was subtle, but it dominated headlines in regional and Western media, reframed as a sign of cultural respect rather than fashion spectacle. Another moment occurred during the 2014 tour of New Zealand and Australia. Catherine's interaction with local communities, especially her calm, warm engagement with children and Indigenous representatives, was repeatedly highlighted. In New Zealand, her respectful participation in Maori cultural ceremonies was noted for its restraint, present but never performative. This balance drew praise from local commentators who contrasted it with earlier royal visits that had felt distant or overly scripted. Perhaps most symbolically charged was the 2022 Caribbean tour, conducted amid growing Republican sentiment. While the tour faced criticism structurally, Catherine's individual moments, such as informal conversations with teachers and healthcare workers, were carefully spotlighted by media as attempts to soften an increasingly tense backdrop. These moments mattered because they localized the monarchy, shifting attention from abstract imperial history to interpersonal connection. In all these cases, attention followed not spectacle, but calibration. Catherine's most noticed moments tend to occur when her visibility reinforces respect rather than dominance, an essential condition for soft power to function. Soft power through image, what Kate represents. Princess Catherine's image functions as a carrier of soft power precisely because it appears apolitical, non-confrontational, and emotionally regulated. Through years of consistency, she has come to represent continuity, reliability, and civility, qualities that Britain seeks to project internationally, especially in periods of political uncertainty. Her visual presentation communicates stability, Repeated use of British designers signals domestic cultural confidence, while selective incorporation of local elements abroad suggests openness without surrendering identity. This balance allows Britain to assert presence without appearing intrusive. Catherine's image thus supports diplomatic goals indirectly, reinforcing trust rather than persuasion. Beyond aesthetics, her demeanor projects emotional intelligence. She listens more than she speaks, avoids overt authority, and rarely positions herself as the center of attention. This creates a perception of humility, which is crucial for post-imperial soft power. In regions sensitive to colonial legacy, such restraint helps neutralize historical tension. What Catherine ultimately embodies is institutional reassurance. She represents a monarchy that is calm, orderly, and self-controlled. That image carries influence not through command, but through familiarity. In soft power terms, she reinforces Britain's ability to remain relevant without force, by being recognizable, predictable, and non-threatening. The long-term impact of royal tours. The long-term influence of Princess Catherine's royal tours lies less in immediate political outcomes and more in cumulative perception. Royal visits rarely change policy, but they shape emotional memory. Catherine's repeated presence builds a narrative of Britain as attentive and engaged, even as its global role evolves. Over time, these tours create symbolic continuity. Countries that have hosted her often reference the visit years later in media retrospectives or diplomatic anniversaries. The monarchy becomes a familiar constant rather than a distant relic. This familiarity lowers resistance to engagement, particularly in Commonwealth nations navigating post-colonial identity. There is also internal impact. At moments when domestic support for the monarchy wavers, positive international reception feeds back into British public confidence. Coverage of Catherine being well received abroad reinforces the idea that the institution still works externally, even if contested internally. However, the influence is fragile. Soft power depends on consistency. Any visible rupture, emotional outburst, misjudged symbolism, or perceived arrogance would erode years of careful positioning. Catherine's long-term impact therefore rests on endurance rather than brilliance. Her tours succeed not because they dominate attention, but because they quietly accumulate trust. In modern diplomacy, that slow accumulation may be one of the monarchy's last effective tools.